Hey, what's up everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the Gobuster, the basics room from TryHackMe. So we're going to get started with task number 1. So basically in this room, we're going to talk about a tool, Gobuster, and what it does is it's used for reconnaissance or enumeration, right? So this is often used to learn more about a target website. And there's several different ways that you can do that. Gobuster actually has quite a bit of functionality, but today we're really going to focus in on 3 parts of Gobuster, and the first part, the web directories and files, is what people use the most often. So basically, Gobuster can be put in different modes, and one of the modes is going to help you enumerate web directories and files. Another one is going to help you enumerate subdomains, and then another one is going to help you enumerate virtual hosts. Now, Gobuster does have other modes, you'll see that, but we're not going to dive into them as deeply. We're just really going to touch on these 3. So read through everything and mark complete, and with that, you are done with task number 1. Now it's on to task number 2, environment and setup. So to understand why we need to do this section or this task, you first need to understand what DNS is. So DNS stands for the domain name system. And basically when you are using the internet and you jump on Google Chrome, Safari, or whatever browser you're using, you don't type in IP addresses to find things, right? You type in like google.com, or you type in youtube.com, or you type in tryhackme.com, right? So the DNS system is the system that converts those names into IP addresses so that your computer knows where to send all your stuff. So it makes it easier for us to memorize websites and to navigate to those websites instead of having to memorize just a bunch of different numbers for every single website we want to visit. So that's what the domain name system does for us. It helps take us from google.com to Google's actual IP address. And it does that all automatically for us. Now, because we're using Gobuster, we kind of have to change how that works. So normally on a computer, your computer just has a DNS server automatically set up that it knows it's supposed to communicate to. And then your computer will communicate to that DNS server as needed. But in this case, what we're going to do is instead of our attack box, which I have open over here, instead of our machine communicating to a normal DNS server to do DNS resolution, we're going to actually change it, and we're going to make our computer go to the target computer or the target machine. So instead of going to a normal DNS server to resolve a host name, we're going to change it to this IP address, this target IP address. And so now our machine is going to be looking to this target machine in order to resolve those host names. And we have to do that so that the room can actually function the way that it's supposed to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this sudo nano etc resolve DNS masq, and we are going to, first I'm going to get out of that, we're going to open a terminal, and then we're going to paste that in there. Here we go. And so basically what that command did, if we go back and look at it, so sudo, that's just going to give us root privileges. Then nano is a text editor. And what are we going to edit? What piece of text? We're going to edit this resolve DNS masq file, which is located in the etc directory. And why? We're going to change this because DNS masq, it's a program that you can download on your computer, and then it basically is a way to do DNS forwarding. So in simple terms, basically DNS masq is a program that lets us set up DNS however we want, right? And so we have that program on our computer here on our attack box. And right now it's set to a normal name server. But like I said, we don't want to go to a normal name server. We want to add our own name server. So we've opened up the file using nano, and now we're going to add this line And it's important that we make it the first line because this is going to go in order. So it's going to try the first line, whatever name server's there. And then if that doesn't work, it's going to try the second line. So we'll paste that in. And so there's our new name server that we added. And that is the same IP address as our target IP address. Okay. So now to save this in Nano, you hit Control X. It's going to ask you if you want to save it. You're going to say yes, and then it's going to say file name. And it's important that you just hit enter here because we need to save it to the exact same file name, okay? Because the DNS MASQ program is looking for this file name to see what name server it should be using. So now what we have to do, now that we have that set up, we have to actually restart the program. And the reason why we have to do that is so that the changes we made actually apply, right? Because we just edited this file up here. Now we need to make sure that the program restarts so it actually is using our new name server. So you can just use this DNS MASQ restart, right? That's essentially the command. So hit enter. It'll say it's restarting. Give it a second. Okay, so it looks like it restarted. So with that, we should be all done. So now, instead of our attack box being normal and just going to a normal DNS name server, now we are going to our target machine to be our DNS server. So make sure you read through all that and mark complete. And with that, you are done with task number 2. And now it's on to task number 3, Gobuster introduction. So Gobuster, basically, it's a super cool tool that helps us enumerate web directories, subdomains, vhosts, Amazon buckets, Google Cloud Storage, and it does that by using word lists. And we'll kind of get more into this as we go into the different examples, and we'll learn how it normally works, and then we'll learn a little bit of nuance for it. But one thing that always helps with learning any tool is you need to know how to get to the help page or the man page, right? Or the manual page. And there's a couple different ways to do that. The one they have here is just gobuster -- help. And if you type in that command, as long as you have Gobuster installed, it'll bring you up to this page. And what this does is it gives you a generic overview of how to use Gobuster. So here they have Gobuster command. That's kind of the usage. And these are the different commands. And it says commands, but I like to think of them as modes, right? So Gobuster has different modes, and you pick your mode depending on what you're looking for. So if I'm looking for directories and files, then I want to use directory mode. If I'm looking for subdomains, then I want to use DNS mode. If I'm looking for vhosts, then I want to use the vhost mode, right? So Gobuster has all these different modes, and we're going to talk about 3 of them specifically. But again, like I said, there's other modes here that you can learn about. And an easy way to learn about a mode is you go Gobuster, and then you put the mode or the command, and then do -- help. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But yeah, whenever you're first learning about a tool, always try and find a manual page or a help page and read through it to understand what it's doing. So with Gobuster, there's kind of a generic, not a generic, but there's a pattern to the syntax. And essentially what it is you're going to put Gobuster to call the tool. Then you're going to pick a mode to put it in. So that could be directory, that could be DNS, that could be fuzz, any of these. And then after that, you're going to put your flags or your options. Okay. So here they talk a little bit about some of these flags. So you have the -T flag, which stands for threads. And threads is basically how fast are you going to go? That's an easy way to think about it. So the higher the thread count, the faster Gobuster is going to move. Okay. And then -W or -- word list. So there's a short flag and a long flag. That is going to be the word list that you're actually using to try and find stuff. And you'll see how that works in a minute as we go through the next tasks. Then you can have this delay flag, which is you can pick a time period and you can actually delay requests. So between every request, you could delay it a certain amount. And this would be good to like maybe avoid detection or that kind of thing. Then we have output and debug. So debug, this is going to help us troubleshoot when we get unexpected errors from our command. And then output, this is going to write the results to a file for us. And we can choose that file. So this is an example that they give us. So first, like I said, you have Gobuster, then you have the mode. So they're calling the Gobuster tool and they're putting it in directory mode. Okay. And now the two most common flags that you are almost always going to use with Gobuster is -u and -w. Okay. -u, that's going to be your URL or your target. So what website are you trying to learn about? You know, what website do you want to attack? And so that's where the -u flag comes in, and that stands for URL. Then you have the word list, and this is the word list, or this is the path to the word list that we're going to actually use to try and find something, right? And then here in this example, they do -t64, so they're setting their thread count to 64, which means it'll go pretty fast because the default for Gobuster is a thread count of 10. Okay, and so they explain all that right here. You can read through that, and then we can jump down to the questions once you've read everything. So what flag do we use to specify the target URL? That's -u. And then what command do we use for the subdomain enumeration mode? That's DNS. And you find that up here when you look at the modes. Again, they call them commands, but I like to think of them as modes. So this is the directory mode. So that would be DNS, or sorry, that is the directory mode. I was right, but that doesn't help us find subdomains. The DNS mode helps us find subdomains, and that's what they're asking about here. And so that would be DNS. So submit that. And with that, you have finished task number 3. Now it's on to task number 4. So now we're going to get into directory mode specifically. So again, you have the --help. So Gobuster --help is going to tell you about all of Gobuster. But let's say I know I want to use directory mode. I'm looking for a file on a web server, or I'm looking for a specific directory, right? In that case, what I can do is I can use the Gobuster dir --help command. So and what that'll do is now it's going to help me, but specifically it's going to help me with directory mode. Okay, so it's not going to tell me about all the other modes that Gobuster has. Now it's just going to give me the stuff that I can use for directory mode. And in directory mode, again, the most common flags that we're going to use is we need a URL string, and we're going to need, where is it? A word list right down here, right? And we can see these are global flags. These are flags that are specific to the directory mode. So they distinguish that for you, which is nice as well. So you can read through that to understand directory mode quite a bit more. And so that's how you can learn more about different modes or commands in Gobuster. Now, here they give us a nice little example of basically a website tree, right? And you have this tree command, and you can go, that's really not the point of the room, but basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to show us how some websites are structured. Yeah. And some websites, they're structured like file systems or system files. And so you have, this is the main website, and then in that website you have WordPress. In that directory you have WordPress admin, WordPress content, WordPress includes. And so what you can do with directory and file enumeration, or dir mode in Gobuster, essentially what it does, and let me show you an example, is if you go to this website, and actually, you know what? I'm just going to copy this so I can mess with it. Ooh, I don't want the whole thing. I just wanted this. I must have copied the whole thing. But basically, so this is a normal website, right? So with a lot of websites, pretty much all websites, they have directories. And what I can do is I can do a / and I can move into that directory. So in our example, we had the main website. So this is the main website. And then they had WordPress. So I can do / WordPress. And now if I navigate there, I'm inside this directory. Now let's say I want to go to wp/admin. So I do another / wp admin. So now if I were to navigate to this website, I would be inside this directory. Okay, so web directories are pretty easy. You just do a / at the end of your URL, and then you can search for directories. And what I'm doing here, it's what Gobuster does automatically. So what it'll do is I give Gobuster this website. And then I say, hey, Gobuster, I have 1,000, 10,000, maybe even 1,000,000 words. And what I want you to do is I want you to do a / followed by that word, whatever the word may be. And Gobuster will do this, and it will automatically search through thousands of those words to see if there's a directory with that name. And by doing that, it automatically searches for directories for me. So that's how Gobuster works. Again, we can see all the flags here. You can go through and read what all these do. You should. There's a couple of these that we're going to need to answer the questions down below. So read through that. I'm not going to go over each one. They're pretty straightforward. And then here, it's going to give us actually how to use directory mode. So the syntax, right? So here we have Gobuster. We're putting it in directory mode. This is the website that we're trying to learn more about. And then this is our path to our word list. So here's a more specific example where they actually give us a word list, right? And so they use the words from this word list, and they will check our website and see if that directory exists. And these word lists can be super huge and like just thousands, again, even up to maybe 1,000,000 words that you're searching for. So if we keep reading through this, it'll tell us more about how this kind of works exactly. And we can see each part of the command. You have the dir command, then we're setting our URL. And then you can also think of this as like path to folder, right? So it's exactly what I talked about up here. Same deal, how we can go into each of these folders. That's what Gobuster does. And then -r configures Gobuster to follow the redirect response received from the sent request. So we can see that right here. Here's the short flag, here's the long flag, and it tells us that that's what it does. So that's what this whole example is. So you can read through all that, and then at the end, it talks about the -x flag. So if we scroll back up here, oh, do they not give us the -x flag? That's not cool. They should. I guess they tell us about it down here. It's not in our fun chart, but that's okay. So here we have the -x flag, and basically what this does is now, instead of looking for directories, if we include the -x flag, we're now looking for files, right? And we can pick different file types. And if you see, we do -x, and then we follow that by the file type that we want to look for. So .php, .js. And so what the -x flag does is similar to how the directory mode, what it does is it's going to put a /, right, on the website we want to attack, and then it's going to look for a directory based on the words that we give it. Now what it'll do is, instead of doing just a directory, it'll take the .php or the .js, and it'll add it to the end of the word. So what would that look like? I just want, okay, doesn't want to highlight by clicking, whatever. So I'm just going to take that. Oh, never mind. I already have it. Okay. So instead of doing something like /admin and then Gobuster tries, let's say /dev, right? And it's looking for all these things. Now, if we add the -x flag, what it'll do is it'll do admin dot p, not dot php, right? Or admin.js or admin.whatever. And then it'll try dev.php. Okay. So what that does is now instead of looking for just directories by their name, we're adding these file extensions to the end of them, and then we're looking for files. Okay. So let's see, you can read through this, and then we'll jump down to the questions. So which flag do we have to add to our command to skip TLS verification? And then it says it wants the long flag notation. So if we look at our chart here, we have no TLS verification. So we can copy that flag and paste it in there. And that's correct. Now it says enumerate the directories of offensivetools.thm. Which directory catches your attention? Okay, so what I'm going to do is TryHackMe already did some work for me. So I'm just going to take this and we're going to plug it in here. So, oh, I didn't want to actually run it. So actually, let me clear this. Okay, so here's the command that TryHackMe already ran, but we got to change it because it wants us to do www.offensivetools.thm, right? And right now, this is trying to attack example.thm. So let's go over here and let's change that. And we can just paste that in. Okay, so now we have Gobuster. We're in directory mode. Our attack URL, or the URL we want to attack, is just this offensivetools.thm. So, which directory catches your attention? This is the word list that they used in all of their examples. So because of that, I'm going to use the same word list. Generally, that's how TryHackMe works. Now, it doesn't say anything about following redirects, so I am actually just going to get rid of that flag, and then maybe we'll have to add it later. We'll see. So I'm going to run that. And here we go. Okay, so we can see we have /images, /home, /media, templates, modules, plugins, includes, languages. So these are all directories, right, that it's looking for. And it keeps on getting this 301 or different errors. But here, if we see, there's home, and that has a status of 200. And this room isn't about, statuses, but you should know status 200 means, okay, so we were able to actually navigate there. So let's try home. Nope. Does it want /home? Maybe not. Maybe home's not the answer. Okay, I figured it would show up quick. Maybe it's not showing up quick, so we're going to wait and we're going to let this run, and then we'll jump back in once we have an answer. Okay, here we go. So at first I thought it was home because we get this status of 200. But then as you look through these, you notice there's one that says secret. Now this is still running, so I'm going to actually stop it because, secret, it doesn't get much more obvious than that, right? So I am going to try secret and see if that's the answer. Yes, it is. Okay. So secret is this directory that is pretty interesting, right? What could the secrets possibly be? So now it wants us to continue enumerating the directory found in question 2. You will find an interesting file there with a .js extension. Okay, so let's clear this because we already found it's secret. So now what I'm going to do is I need to add that directory, right? And so I have to do that because if I don't include this in my URL, then it's going to look in the same directory that I just looked in. Like it's going to look at the main website for the first directory. But I already found an interesting directory, so now I want to navigate to it, and then I want to look inside of it. And if we remember, this says it's going to be a JS, there's a file with a .js extension, right? So the flag for that is going to be our -x. Okay. And we want, it did say .js, right? Yeah, .js. Now, if we wanted, we could do multiple of these, and we could do like .js and then a comma, and then that would be followed by other extension types that we want to look for. But they told us it's a .js, so we're going to look for just .js. And then as before, we have our word list here. So hit enter. Okay, so Gobuster's still running, but we can already see here we have this flag.js, right? And that's pretty interesting. Okay, and we're looking for the flag. So now what do we do? So I'm going to close this. And what we can do is there's a couple of different ways to do this. What I'm going to use curl, and curl actually, you can do a lot of cool stuff with curl. But if you just do curl followed by URL, or my bad, did that backwards. Oh boy. And then the name of that, was it offensive tool or tools? I know it ended with .thm, and that's /secret, or was it, yeah, it was secret, not secrets. And then we're looking for the flag.js file. I think that's right. Let me double check. Is it offensive tools, plural? Yeah, I think that's right. So curl, you can do a lot of cool stuff with curl, but if you just use it this way, then what it's doing is it's just sending a GET request to this URL, and it's going to return whatever it gets. So if I hit enter, do I have to put this in parentheses? I didn't think I did, but maybe I do. Maybe I don't need the HTTP. Oh, there we go. So I thought you had to do the whole HTTP /, but I guess you don't. So learn something new every day. Okay, so curl followed by just that, and then that will give you the flag. So you can copy that and then paste it and submit that. And with that, you have finished task number 4, using it for directory and file enumeration, right? So that's what we did. We found this first directory, and then we went inside of it, and then we looked for a file, and we found this flag.js file. Okay? So with that, we're done with task 4. Now it's on to task number 5, subdomain enumeration. So this section, again, it's going to walk us through the DNS mode of Gobuster, just like the previous task. Task 4 walked us through the directory mode. The DNS mode, now instead of looking for the things like directories and files that we add at the end of a URL, let me clear this. Now what we're going to be looking for is we're going to be looking for things that come at the beginning of a URL. So that will look kind of like this. I'll give you some examples of what that might look like. So we might have shop.offensivetools.thm, or you might have admin.offensivetools.thm, or I don't know, donate.offensivetools.dhm, right? So now we're setting Gobuster to a mode where it's going to look for these subdomains, and it's going to do that by adding our words. Instead of adding our words to the end to look for directories and files, we're going to add our word list words to the beginning, and then we're just going to put a dot in front of it. And that way we're going to start searching for subdomains. So again, you have to put that in DNS mode. If you want to learn more about DNS mode and all of the flags and everything that it offers, you can do the Gobuster DNS -- help command. And here are some of the common flags. So you can show the CNAME, you can show the IP address, resolver. So this configures a custom DNS server to use for resolving if you want to do that. And then D, the domain. So this flag configures the domain that we actually want to enumerate, right? So now instead of providing a URL, we're going to provide a domain, okay? Because it's going to tack it, like I said, it's going to add our word list to the front of this, not the end. So you can read through all of this. Here they give us a real example. Here's our example.thm, so that's our domain. Here's our word list. So pretty straightforward, a lot like the last time. And we're not going to do anything fancy here. We're not going to use really any of these flags other than the most basic ones. So apart from the DNS keyword and the -w flag, which shorthand flag is required for the command to work, for Gobuster DNS to work, you have to give it a domain, right? No choice. It needs a domain to look at. So now we want to use the commands to find how many subdomains are configured on offensivetools.thm. So we're going to copy that, and then we'll jump over here, and it's going to be Gobuster DNS. We're going to do a -d, and then we're going to paste our domain. And then we want our word list, which I should have just copied this example because I don't want to type out that whole word list. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste it in here. And there's our crazy long word list. So we're going to run this command. And again, you can kind of see it. So it found www.offensivetools.thm, forum.offensivetools, store.offensivetools. So here's another www, and this confuses people, but if you look, this is lowercase, this is capitalized, but they're the same, okay? So those two, they really only count as one. And then we have primary.offensivetools.thm. So these are all the subdomains that we were able to find. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then these two count as 1, so that's 4. So we were able to find 4 subdomains. So put that in, mark that question, and with that, you have finished task number 5, subdomain enumeration. Now it's on to task number 6. Okay, so directory and file enumeration, pretty straightforward what's going on, right? We give Gobuster a word list, it's going to add it to the end of the URL, and it's going to look for directories and files for us. Same thing with subdomain enumeration, task number 5, right? It's going to do the same thing basically, but instead of adding it to the end, it's going to add it to the front, and it's going to look for subdomains. vhosts. So vhosts are a bit more complicated. So first, you want to know what a vhost is. And what a vhost is it's basically, not basically, I mean, it is just a server that hosts multiple websites, right? That's all it is. So with subdomains, and now this, you could go down a whole rabbit hole talking about this, like what's the difference. So I'm going to try and sum this up as quickly as I can, which I'm terrible at because I care too much about the details. But so with directories and file enumerations, you can organize your website by splitting it up into different directories. And then it looks just like it's a file structure on your web server, basically, is all it is. Now, subdomains are also really cool. And kind of the difference here is a directory or file enumeration, right? Or not file enumeration. We're really talking about the directories here. That can help you organize your website, but everything is connected. Everything is on one web server, and everything is all there, right? You just have different directories that kind of divide up your website and keep it organized. Now, what a subdomain has that makes it different is it has its own DNS resolution, okay? So What that means is, for example, with what we found earlier, right? So we have forum.offensivetools.thm. So let's say offensive tools, let's say www.offensivetools.thm, let's say that goes down, like that website crashes or whatever. The store, because it's its own thing, it's related, but it's its own subdomain, and maybe it's not, subdomains don't even have to be on the same web server, right? So let's say it's on a different web server, so store.offensivetools.thm is still up, which means they can still sell stuff, right? So having a subdomain is more useful. It's a lot more work than doing a directory kind of thing, because a directory is super easy. You just do the / at the end of your URL and you set up directories and files. That's it. But it's kind of the downside to that is it's really easy to set up, but then you don't have as much freedom as you do with subdomains. Subdomains can be on their own IP addresses because they can be on their own web servers, and subdomains, it's really nice because they can be really separate. So you could have a different code base for the forum part of your website versus the store part of your website, right? So your code base for forums would probably look a little bit different than your code base for the store of your website. And so it can divide all that up real nice for you. That's why subdomains are pretty sweet. Now, vhosts. Now that we kind of understand the difference between like why use directories versus why use subdomains. So what a vhost is it is, again, it's when one web server hosts multiple sites. So sometimes that looks exactly like a subdomain. And in this room, all of the vhosts that we find are going to look exactly like subdomains. And that's pretty common, actually. Depending on how you set things up, that can happen. People can do it. But on top of that, you can have vhosts that are totally different, right? So you could have one web server and it could host offensivetools.com and it could host example.com, right? So two totally unrelated websites. You could technically do that. And that happens more often with like cloud services and stuff, because they, with cloud services, they have the hardware, you do a bunch of the other stuff, and you borrow their hardware. And so cloud services will sometimes host multiple totally separate websites on the same web server. So yeah, like I said, there's kind of a lot of detail in this and you probably don't need it, but hey, it makes you smarter. So that's what a vhost is. Now we can use vhost mode, and essentially what this does is with DNS mode, Gobuster was just adding stuff to the end of this, right? With vhost mode, what Gobuster does is it is going to change the host header field of your requests, okay? So if you take a look at that host header field, that normally just has the website you're trying to get to. But what we can do with vhost mode is we can set some different flags that we'll talk about here shortly, and we can edit that host header and we can do different stuff with it so that it can try to find these other vhosts, right? Because more often than not, if a web server has vhosts, the way that the web server knows, so we'll go back to my example. Let's say a web server has offensivetools.com and it has example.com. So how does the web server know which website I'm looking for? Like maybe I want example.com, but the web server also has everything for offensivetools.com. How does it know which one to give me? Because the web server only has one IP address. And the way that the web server knows is by looking at my host header field. Okay. So you can see that there, and we'll go through kind of how that gets edited. So read through this whole top part again. It's going to talk about virtual hosts, which are IP based and they're running on the same server. And the big difference here is subdomains have a DNS, whereas virtual hosts do not. Okay. So read through that, and then we can always get help by using Gobuster and then the command or the mode, which in this case would be vhost, help, and it'll give us all the flags. So here's some common flags that we're going to be using. Some of them, we're not going to use all of them. But again, you have the URL, you have append domain, okay? And people get a little confused here. So I like to talk about the domain flag first. So what the domain flag is, this is going to set the domain string, okay? And just that's all it does, okay? It sets that string. And then what append domain does is it then will append the domain string to each word in the word list, okay? And I know that's kind of confusing. I'm not totally, there's probably a really good reason why it's this way. I don't know what that is, or who knows, maybe there's another way to use the tool that I'm not aware of, but the way that TryHackMe is going to have us use it is, that's the way to think about it. You have the domain, which just says, hey, what's the domain string that you want to add to your host header field? And then we have append domain, which is then going to take that string and it's going to append it to our host header field. So for these to work, you kind of need to use both. Okay. So hopefully that makes some sense. We'll get into our example here in a sec. Then we have some other ones that are a lot easier to understand. The URL flag, we have the method, so we can do a get or a post request. So we can change the method if we want. We have exclude length, which is important because we can exclude results based on length of the response body, and this will help us clear out stuff that we don't want, right? So it helps us filter the results for things that we're looking for specifically. And then, like before with some of the other modes, we have this -R, which will follow redirects. So now, how to use this? So again, you're going to do Gobuster, vhost, provide the URL, and then the word list. But with this, there's a couple of other things we have to add because of the way that this room is set up. We have to add the domain, example.thm. And so what this is doing is this is just saving example.thm like we see right here. It's just saving that in the domain string. Then if we scroll all the way over here, we have append domain with nothing else next to it, just append domain. And so what this in combination with this is doing, like we just talked about, is it's just taking this example.thm and it's going to append it. So add it to the end of whatever word is in our word list, right? So in this case, blog was the word in our word list, and we appended the domain string example.thm. Okay. So sometimes, like I said, sometimes vhosts look like this. Other times vhosts can be totally different websites on the same web server. So now you're probably wondering, how in the world can I tell the difference between a vhost that looks like this and a subdomain? And the way that you can do that is using DNS. So there's DNS tools that you can use to determine that. And that's not what this room is about, so I'm not going to go into it. Just know that that's how you can do that if you ever needed to do that. So down here, this is where it's going to kind of explain the complexities of -- domain and -- append domain, which I already talked about. So again, this is what a GET request looks like. This is our host header. And so what Gobuster does is it takes in the normal vhost mode. So if we didn't add any of the flags, if we just did Gobuster vhost example.thm and gave it a word list, all it would do is it would go to example.thm the first time. And then it would keep sending requests to that same IP address, but it would replace this host header with each word inside of our word list, but just the word. So in this case, if we didn't add all the extra domain flags, it would just do blog. That's all that would be here. And then it would do shop. And then it would do www. And then it would do, whatever. So that's how it works if you don't add any of the flags. Now, again, by adding these two flags, what we're doing is we're adding example.thm to the end of every one of these words. Okay. So you can read through all that. They're going to break down these commands right here, which we've already kind of done. So you can look closer at each one. So you can read through that if you need to. So here, again, sets the top and second level domain of host name. So, and I don't like that it says that, because technically we could add, even a subdomain in here if we wanted to. So basically you're just saving this domain in as a string, and then append is going to add it. So it's going to add it to each entry in the word list. So, and like it says right here, if this flag is not configured, the host name would be www.blog, just like I talked about earlier. So now let's get down to the question. We're going to use the commands we learned to find out how many vhosts are on the offensivetools.thm domain and reply with a status code 200. So again, with TryHackMe, a lot of times they're nice. They do some of the legwork for us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal this, because I don't want to type this out. So I'm going to copy that. Let me clear this for you. And then I'm going to paste it. But I don't want to run it yet, right? Because there's a few things that we have to do. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to set this -u flag. And we're going to set that to offensivetools.thm. Now, with the vhost mode, we could actually also use the IP address. It really doesn't matter. And so just for fun, actually, no, I'm just going to do it. So it's www.offensivetools.thm, right? Now we have domain, and I'm going to do offensivetools.thm. And did that need, let me double check here. I think that might need quotes. Nope, no, it doesn't. Okay. And so now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why do I have to put it in the URL and in the domain? And the reason why is because the URL is what we're attacking. And because vhosts all have the same IP address because they're on one web server, the way Gobuster works, like I said before, it's going to resolve this one time. And then it's going to take note of that IP address. And then from there on out, it's not going to use offensivetools.thm. It's going to use the IP address, and it's going to change that host header. Okay. So that's why we kind of have to put this in twice. And yeah, it's a little funny. And then they have this append domain. I'm going to use the word list they used. I'm also going to use this exclude length 250 to 320. If you look again down here, this filters the requests, and it does that based on size. It's pretty easy. There's lists and stuff, and you can figure out what sizes you should set this to filter out different types of error codes and stuff. I'm not going to get into it too much. You can always just Google that, but I'm just going to use the one that they used, because again, that's TryHackMe. They're very nice, and they do that for us. So here we go. If we look again, we have form.offensivetools, store.offensivetools, to www. And then secret.offensivetools. Okay, so that's again 1, 2, 3, and then we have these two together combined to make 4. So you can hit submit, and with that, you are done with task number 6. Now it's on to task number 7, the conclusion. You can read through this, but again, Gobuster, super awesome tool, works really fast, and we've dove into some of the 3 different modes. Again, these tools are awesome, and the fact that we can all just use them is great, and there's a lot of nuance to them that you can learn about if you want to even dig deeper and learn about the other modes. But right now, after this room, you should have a pretty good standing of the tool, a pretty good understanding of the tool overall, and these 3 modes that we talked about. So mark complete. And with that, you have finished task number 7, and you have finished Gobuster, the basics room from TryHackMe.